Tensions seem to be simmering in the Korean Peninsula, especially after North Korean leader Kim Jong Un said that the country would no longer pursue reconciliation with South Korea. The North Korean leader has called for constitutional changes to ensure that South Korea is now seen as its primary enemy. To talk more on the escalating tensions in the Korean Peninsula, we're now being joined by So Young-ho, South Korean presidential correspondent at Arirang TV. Thanks very much for taking our time and joining us here on WION The World.
Hi, Raisha.
Now, we are witnessing fresh war of words between North and South Korea. How do you assess the escalating tensions in the Korean Peninsula, and what kind of an impact does it have in the broader region there?
Right, so Raisha, well, it may not be entirely surprising as the war rhetoric has been building up for quite some time now on North Korea's end. I mean, going back to the autumn of 2022, we saw North Korea declaring itself as a nuclear state and really making that a part of its constitution. Then during the start of 2023, last year, regime leader Kim Jong Un called for preparations for a, quote, revolutionary war for accomplishing reunification, along with other such war-related themes in statements by high-level North Korean officials, including his very own sister Kim Yo-jong, all of which are material consumed by North Korean citizens, of course. So these kind of acerbic remarks and threats against South Korea, they continued throughout last year. And during the first week of this year, the new year, of course, North Korea fired scores of artillery shells at the south, and then we had the ballistic missile launch on Sunday. And on Monday, of course, as you mentioned, the regime leader emphasized, again, its hostile position towards the south at the North Supreme People's Assembly meeting, somewhat like a cabinet meeting, where he said in the event of war on the Korean Peninsula, the North is going to consider, the North should consider completely occupying, suppressing and reclaiming South Korea, subjugating it to the territory of the North. Now, that, of course, is unacceptable. And, well, the question really is, why now? And North Korea's goal has always been very clearly to undermine the South Korea-US alliance and also weaken them individually. And the best timing does seem to be ahead of South Korea's parliamentary elections in April, where there are sort of domestic tensions, and the United States presidential election, of course, coming up later this year in November. Now, that means both Seoul and Washington are somewhat maybe domestically distracted at this point, making it a really good window of time for Pyongyang to really start testing and ramping up its weapons capabilities and stir up disorder and social division in both countries.
Right, Mr. I was just coming to that point you made there as to why was this particular decision by North Korea taken now, where it has taken a historic step to discard a decades-long pursuit of unification. Do you think that this step comes at a time when Kim is trying to break out of diplomatic isolation, especially with Pyongyang's close ties with Moscow and Beijing?
Right, now that is really a very good question, and you asked about the timing again, of course, which is very important, as previously mentioned. And well, unfortunately, the reality is that South Koreans are all too familiar with North Korea's threats and provocations, the rhetoric that have been raising tensions against the border. And it's also true that citizens here in the South, we have become somewhat desensitized to years of North Korea's very sort of acerbic, foul-mouthed propaganda machine. But it is at the same time really unnerving, especially as they basically annihilated the inter-Korean military agreement made on September 19th, 2018, if that's correct, on reducing tensions across the border and keeping a buffer zone in the West Sea, something that Kim Jong Un, again in his speech on Monday, undermined. And it has been growingly it's growingly becoming a concern that, as you mentioned, North Korea and countries like Russia, perhaps even Iran, they've been increasing their military engagement and exchanges of weapons collaboration. So with that in mind, it is highly concerning.
This does seem to be the lowest point of intra-Korean ties. My question to you is that, Ms. O, what comes next after this?
Well, what comes next for South Korea, the United States, and now Japan, it has been to really increase deterrence against North Korea's growing provocations, all the while keeping a door open for dialogue. That has always been Seoul's policy, keeping a door open for diplomacy. It's offered time and time again to restart talks on easing tensions across the border, restarting joint economic projects, but most of all, of course, restarting talks on denuclearization. But all of those, Pyongyang has rejected time and time again, and there seems to be no solutions because they are the ones, the North Korean regime are the ones shutting down these talks, raising these tensions. But the response from the South Korean government today, however, has been to recognize that North Korea is really using this timing to undermine South Korean society and trying to cause social division. That is what our President Yoon Suk-yeol said earlier today on Tuesday at a weekly cabinet meeting. He said that North Korea is really trying to stir up these tensions. And in fact, he said it is not the North Korean people, the citizens who are the threat. It's the regime that's pursuing nuclear weapons. And he even raised concern towards the lack of human rights for North Koreans and said, in fact, he's going to pursue the better welfare for North Korean defectors here in South Korea. So I sense that Seoul, in talks with Washington and Tokyo as well, they're trying to take a measured, mature approach to this, but the North regime has really not been very helpful.
My last question to you, Ms. So do you think the other countries will also get involved in the simmering tensions between the two Koreas at this moment?
Well, it depends on which countries you mean, really. If you, on South Korea's side, of course, it has already been increasing cooperation with the United States and Japan. And there are indications that the leaders of the three countries will continue to really strengthen that cooperation this year, especially as South Korea and the United States, they're going to conclude the guidelines on taking a nuclear response to any nuclear or missile provocation by the North by this June, I believe, under their nuclear consultative group that was formed last year. And of course, there should be a trilateral summit of leaders coming up sometime this year as well, really reaffirming their commitment to countering North Korea's threat, as the three of them did in unison at Camp David last August. So they will be definitely ramping up their response. As for North Korea, it seems for the time being, its collaborations with Russia will continue in terms of weapons exchange and military consultations. And unfortunately, it seems that the North is getting a bit more confident, very cocky about its increasing cooperation on that front.
Yes. Right, Ms. Oh, we'll have to wait and see the repercussions of the simmering tensions in the Korean Peninsula at this moment. But thanks very much for taking our time and joining us here on WION.
Thank you.